Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Vienna Live with Simeon Moore and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please go to the LinkedIn Live video feed, the link to which I have now placed in the chat room. This show thrives on participant contributions, and all participants are encouraged to actively participate by asking questions and making comments. To do so, please write in the chat room or turn on your microphone and say hi. We'll be delighted to include your perspective in the conversation. Tonight, our featured guest is Dr. Eddie Henderson, a jazz trumpeter whose career has spanned 7 decades. Dr. Henderson's latest album, Witness to History, will be the subject of tonight's conversation.
I can't even fathom a thought of anything that has been left out. I've been given an overabundance.
Look, man, I mean, who do we know that's a champion ice skater, a shrink, a medical doctor, and one of the greatest jazz musicians in the world?
Dr. Henderson, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure.
Dr. Henderson, so tell us a little bit about where you come from, how your musical tastes were formed, and you have so many talents, as was just said. You become a medical professional figure skating, even zoology. Tell us why you decided then to become a jazz trumpeter.
Okay, let me start back from the beginning. I was born into a musical family. My mother was a dancer in the original Cotton Club. She was the dance partner of Bill Robinson, Bojangles, and her roommate at that particular time, in the late 30s, early 40s, was Billie Holiday. Best friend was Lena Horne, all those musical beings. My father was in a group called Billy Williams and the Charioteers, was the #1 Black singing group in America at that particular time. And they were on the Bing Crosby show 5 days a week for about 3 years in the early 40s. So that's my heritage, familial heritage and musical heritage. So when I was 9 years old, my mother took me to see Louis Armstrong. I was in the 5th grade. I hadn't started playing music yet. However, I love to hear my father sing and going down to see my mother dance with the Cotton Club. But she took me backstage to meet Louis Armstrong. And it was then there in 1949 that Louis Armstrong in person taught me how to make a sound on his trumpet. And then lo and behold, that turned into the rest of my life. But at that particular time, I had no idea really who he was. I heard of his name, but I thought he was just an average person walking down the street. In retrospect, wow.
Okay, fantastic. Let's have a listen to. This is, we are going to listen to now Totem Pole from the new album. tell us, Dr. Henderson, about this new album. Tell us why
Yes.
you decided to make this Witness to History, as it's called.
Well, I think it's the thought process in my making Witness to History, because as you mentioned on your opening remarks about my 7-decade career in music, all the things that I have seen during that particular time, from Miles Davis to Lee Morgan, Woody Shaw, Freddie Hubbard, having a chance to play with Art Blakey, McCoy Tyner, Elvin Jones, all these iconic beings, musical beings, and my superheroes of mine. And I did have a chance to rub shoulders with them on the bandstand. And so at this point in my life, I said, wow, let me make a documentation of all the things and the musical peers and heroes of mine that I had a chance to play with, and hopefully some of that musicality rubbed off.
Okay, great. Let's listen to another track then. This is
Okay.
Born to Be Blue. So tell us, Dr. Henderson, you're saying, I mean, when you talk about Elvin Jones, McCoy Tyner, Miles Davis, to my generation, these are near deities, and you were, associating with them all the time. So for this album, you as a band leader, tell us, how did you decide which musicians you want to record this? I imagine a lot of people got a little bit scared.
Yeah, well, that was the easy choice for me, because all these people, the personnel on this particular album, I played with them for many, many years over my career. So I knew all their musical qualities. I know how they listened to each other. And so it was definitely an easy choice for me, because some musicians, they have a name, some play on top of the beat, some play behind the beat, just intuitively. Even before we even got together, I knew it's just like in chemistry. You put certain elements together, you could have a precipitate. Put other elements together, you have an explosion in chemistry. So this is musical chemistry. Even before we played, I knew this was going to be an emulsion where everything would coincide, is melt into everyone else, just intuitively. I kind of learned that intangible quality of seeing how Miles Davis put together groups. And he told me, even before they played, he knew how I was going to sound just by the intangible aspect of how they played individually. You know, you don't have to have a bunch of auditions. If you have that astute awareness, then you can tell beforehand. And that's a mark of a good a band leader who knows how to put together. You don't arbitrarily say, "Oh, I'm going to get this name and that name," and it's like rocks in a box and shaking it. That's not going to necessarily make music. You have to have beforehand thought of the musical qualities of the particular individuals. So this is an easy choice to me because all these guys are great musicians and they have compassion and they know how to support each other. So it sounds like one organism.
And Dr. Henderson, to follow up on that, I imagine there are many musicians among our participants tonight. When you talk about, figuring out what's important in a musician or what kind of musician you're looking for, how do people be on the lookout for that? And I'm just going to say that I remember hearing, in the classical music world, a famous conductor, Simon Rattle, he said, "Oh, well, people should read a lot of poetry," or something like that.
Well, well, I can understand that aspect. I read a lot of spiritual books and experience life itself, and see and feel all the pain, the ups and downs of life itself, and then you can get a feel when you're musically on the bandstand, the ups and downs of the music. You get an intangible an awareness of what's going to work and what doesn't work. Yeah.
So in other words,
That's an ethereal answer, but that's about the best I could do.
so in other words, this, scales and the so-called
Yeah.
woodshedding, this is a part of it, but you're looking for the complete picture.
Beyond that, beyond just the surface of scales, up and down the scale, and the right chord and all that, how they play. Because when you're learning music, you're at home by yourself. You don't hear anybody else. It's, oh, I can really play now. I know all my scales. And then you shift gears to the next step. Oh, wow, I got to play with other people too and listen to them too. And then, oh, now, okay, I'm playing with other people listening. But now I remember Miles Davis told me one time, he said, "Eddie, you sound good. Why don't you stop trying to play the trumpet and play music?" Whoa, what a mouthful. So you learn the instrument itself, and then you said, stop trying to play the instrument because the instrument is just the vehicle through which you play music. So look past your nose and past the instrument and think about playing music. And that's that intangible quality I was talking about. Not how well they play the instrument, but how they think, their thought process of playing collectively music together.
Okay, let's listen to
I phrased it better.
let's listen to another track. This is "It Never Entered My Mind."
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that brings us now to our a more philosophical part of the conversation that I know everyone looks forward to each week. Dr. Henderson, your new album's title, Witness to History, reflects how you've enjoyed edifying associations with so many influential figures from the post-war era. The new documentary about you is titled Dr. Eddie Henderson, Uncommon Genius, reflecting the talents you've successfully developed over the span of your 7-decade career. Tell us about when you've met with rejection and failure. The most intriguing aspect of human history is the interaction between an individual's dreams and her or his daily reality. In other words, was it the person or was it the circumstances that allowed for an enviable success or miserable failure? What rejections and failures did the teenager Eddie Henderson live through in the 1950s? Today, what struggles does the patriarch, Dr. Eddie Henderson, envision he will need to hand off to the next generation?
Well, that certainly is a wonderful, wide open question. Um, the my first encounter with a failure or an obstacle in my life was when I was 14 years old. I was introduced to figure skating, and I fell in love with figure skating. Wonderful sport, and I was inspired by going to see the Ice Follies and the star of it, Richard Dwyer, was the star, and my first few lessons were from him. And so I I threw myself head over heels into figure skating. I thought that was going to be my calling in life from age 14. And even though had started playing the trumpet since I was 9, I love figure skating. And so this is in San Francisco. I wanted to join the figure skating club. San Francisco, a liberal city in the United States. The president of the club says he wouldn't even give me an application to join. And so I said, well, why? Yeah, I didn't understand. So he told me why, because I was black. And I remember going home on the bus. I cried like a baby, but that just made me mad. So that obstacle turned into the fuel and motor of inspiration to say, hey, look, I don't care what you say. You're not going to stop me. You're not going to quell my drive because I love this, and I'm not going to let anybody stop me. And so time and events went on. I became the first Black person on this planet to compete in figure skating. And then after that, I went to Denver, Colorado when I was in the Air Force. And the Denver Figure Skating Club, with open arms, wanted me to represent them in the Midwestern Championships. That's why I won the bronze medal. But then, lo and behold, after I finished medical school, I went back to San Francisco. And Peggy Fleming, the Olympic champion at that time, was going to be the star for their show, but they needed somebody to be the male star. So the club that rejected me, they had a big power struggle and voted me to skate in their show to be the counterpart of Peggy Fleming. So, that was the turnaround. Now, the other aspect of rejection, that was sort of like Jackie Robinson, the first Black person in figure skating, all the racism he encountered. Well, look how it turned out for him. Look how it turned out for me. And then the other thing was when I first started trying to dip my toes into learning how to play jazz, I could play the trumpet because I was studying at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music while in high school. Also, I could play technically, but I didn't know how to improvise. My first encounter of going to a jam session, I walked in the club, they were playing. I thought it was a hootenanny, I just pulled out my horn, two notes. I played 2 notes. The band stopped. People turned around and said, what the? And I remember the saxophone player, he came over and he said, look, brother, put your horn back in your case and get the hell out of here with that SHIT. So I started crying. I said, well, man, you all sounded so good. I just wanted to be a part of it. He said, well, go home and practice. I said, practice? I can play. Practice what? So the show said, I had no idea of how the practice. and knowledge you had to have in order to play jazz. And so after that, for 2.5 years, every time I'd walk in the club every weekend, after our club, they said, "Here come this cat." I said, "Hi guys, can I play?" They say, "Wait till the last set, brother." Last set would come. We'll come back next week. For 2.5 years, behind those first two notes, I played, and then all of a sudden they found out I was in undergraduate school, planning to go to the medical school to be a doctor. But so between themselves, they says, "Well, let's let old Square Doc sit in, and because maybe after he finishes school, he can write us some prescriptions." That just made me mad again. I said, "Look, I'm gonna learn how to play." And then when Herbie Hancock finally hired me on the fluke accident, the same guys who told me I couldn't play, wouldn't get off the band, said, "My brother Eddie, I knew you had it in you. Man, you could always play good." I said, "Yeah, right." The turnaround again. So those are my experiences and obstacles that turn into successes. So my recommendation for any musician, whether you're in music or any discipline, just because you have a stumbling block, persevere. If your heart is in what you love, don't let anybody tell you that you cannot do it. That's my advice. It worked for me.
Okay, let's listen to another track.
Okay.
This is "I'm Going to Miss You, My Darling." So, Dr. Henderson, tell us, what do you wish all of those of us who listen to this album?
Could you repeat that question again?
Sure. What do you wish everyone who listens to this album?
I wish everyone hears this album. Here's the joy that the musicians had in performing it, and the joy that I had in my witness to the history before the album, the joy I had observing all these wonderful people that contributed to my musical being. And especially this last composition we just heard, "I'm Gonna Miss You, My Darling," has special significance to me because my wife wrote that. Now, when you first hear the title, it sounds like I'm dead. No, it really meant when I go on the road on a gig, I'm going to miss you until you come home. That's not a eulogy. And one more thing I wanted to say, we were talking about picking the chemistry of people. If you notice how the saxophone player and I melted in playing that melody. That's over and above the call of duty. He's just not reading notes. We're touching souls through the medium of sound, and that's the ideal. That I want young musicians to observe that astute reality when they're performing. Always go out of your way to touch the person you're playing with, touch his soul through the medium of sound. Yeah.
Let's see how we can buy the new album. So
Okay.
here it is, smokesessionrecords.com. And then you can see you can download it here, you can stream it, you can listen to it again, just like we were listening to it. So there it is, smokesessionrecords.com. And it's Dr. Eddie Henderson, Witness to History. I'm going to put this in the chat box right now so everyone can have that. There it is, put it in the chat box. And let's see how we can stay in touch with Dr. Henderson. We have here his Facebook. So, Dr. Henderson, that's where you said that's where people can follow you, your concerts and all that.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. And people can reach out to you if they have any questions or comments.
I'd love it.
Fantastic. Okay, so feel free to reach out to Dr. Eddie Henderson. I put his Facebook page in the chat room if you're interested. That's Facebook, Eddie Henderson. Okay. Thank you so very much to Dr. Eddie Henderson.
Oh, it's been a wonderful experience for me too, Simeon.
So let's see what's coming up next week on Vienna Live. So we see there's some nice content here at simeonmorrow.com that people can already watch if we have it. And here it is. Omar Sosa's 88 well-tuned drums. Quote, in order to fully appreciate the magnitude of Sosa's artistry, it is important to know the cultural and musical environment that nurtured it. Born on April 10th, 1965 in Camagüey, Cuba, conservatory-trained Sosa grew up in a musical culture where folkloric, classical, and jazz music coexisted, but not on equal terms. Pianistically, Sosa is the latest in a long line of incredible Cuban pianists, from Bebo and Chucho Valdés to Emiliano Salvador and Gonzalo Rubalcaba, to name a very select few. But unlike those aforementioned masters, who primarily play Latin jazz extensions of the mambo, cha-cha rumba, and the danzón, Sosa set forth to adapt those Afro-Cuban genres to the far-flung African-derived music, dances, and instruments of the Black diaspora, dispersed throughout the infamous Middle Passage, creating a true world music with black, brown, and beige tinges. That is written by Eugene Hawley Jr., a contributor to Downbeat, about the new album, Omar Sosa's 88 well-tuned drums. Come welcome Omar Sosa to Vienna Live. That's next week. And again, all information about upcoming shows can be found at www.simeonmorrow.com. So I just want to say, before we sign off, that I imagine there are going to be some questions. If it's okay with you, Dr. Henderson, we'll stay on after I turn off the live stream, and then people can ask questions if they have anything. Want to tune in? Perfect.
Be my pleasure.
So again, thank you so very much to Dr. Eddie Henderson. Thank you to Natsuko Henderson. Thank you to Victoria and Frederick Mulligan, and Agnieszka and Benoit Rivolet for their support of this show. Thanks to my cousin Mike, a marketer from Layer App. If you're an architect or engineer, they have a really cool tool that you should check out. Thanks also to Mary Schlesinger for the lovely Viennese library you can see behind me. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants, who make it all worthwhile. From New York City, New York, and New London, New Hampshire, goodbye, and see you next week.
Thank you.